Good evening and welcome to the next event in the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network's Liberating webinar series. My name is Lydia XZ Brown, pronouns they, them, and I am AWN's Director of Policy Advocacy and External Affairs. Tonight, we are joined by four fabulous community organizers who will be speaking about from the ground up community organizing at the margins. There's also an adorable cat on one of the screens. Please come back. We want to see the cat flitting across the screen. For a description of myself, this is Lydia still speaking. I am a black and white square of an East Asian person staring mysteriously off into the distance. I'd like to introduce our four guests this evening. First, I'd like to introduce Ría Thompson-Washington, an anti-racist activist, organizer, and Black queer feminist living in the Metro Washington, D.C. area. For more than 20 years, Ría has been organizing, strategizing, and training Black and Latinx people around the country. In San Antonio, where she spent a lot of time growing up, Ría supported local houseless people by organizing food drops with the community group Food Not Bombs. After Hurricane Katrina, Ría volunteered with efforts to support newly displaced New Orleanians in Texas through clothing and food drives. Then she joined the Service Employees International Union in 2006 in San Antonio, Texas as a community organizer, empowering city and county employees who, under right to work laws, were struggling to form their own union. Later, Ría canvassed with Texas Campaign for the Environment and Obama for America in 2008, Austin, Texas, to fundraise for efforts to prevent landfills in largely Black and brown communities and help elect the country's first Black president. Ría has spent her career working for various campaigns in many different capacities, from Occupy Wall Street to the Movement for Black Lives, as a trainer, facilitator, fundraiser, activist, artist, and organizer, to name a few. And I know Ría because we both serve on the National Executive Committee or the board of the National Lawyers Guild. And that's where we met. Next, I'd like to introduce Noor Pervez. Noor is a student organizer turned disability and LGBT plus educator, community organizer, public speaker, and internet researcher. He focuses on intersections of disability, race, gender identity, sexuality, and religion. Noor is on the board as an accessibility leader at Masjid Arabia, MASJIDALRABIA, a queer, trans, and women-centered and led mosque. He is an American Association of People with Disabilities, Paul G. Hearn, Emerging Award Leader, Emerging Leader Award. I can't read or speak, recipient. And he is using the funding to begin the process of making an easy read translation of the Holy Quran. This project is designed to make learning about Islam accessible for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. He has bylines at Rooted in Rights and the Disability Visibility Project blog, and can frequently be found posting about his beagle, Kibby, K-I-B-B-Y, all capital letters, on Twitter at Snoring Doggo. Next, I'd like to introduce Mariam Banahi, a member of the Garland Sit-in and Occupation, which occupied the central administrative building of Johns Hopkins University for 35 days in spring 2019 to protest the formation of an armed private police force, contracts of US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and advocacy support for Tyrone West, a Baltimorean who was murdered by police in 2013. In addition, she was involved in Palestine solidarity work for years, co-organizing the first teach-in in recent memory at JHU, the teach-in for Gaza in October 2014. She likewise organized with her peers to protest rape culture at JHU, administrative changes to graduate programs and stipends, and the gutting of the program for the study of women, gender, and sexuality. And last, but absolutely not least, I'd like to introduce Priya Penner, who's a multiply disabled queer activist of color with grassroots organizing experience at local, state, and national levels. Hailing from snowy upstate New York, Penner learned about disability pride and disability rights at a very young age. Lucky and jealous. She spent several years using her knowledge of the independent living philosophy to organize on the grassroots level with National Disability Rights Organization, ADAPT, as well as on the local and collegiate levels. Penner joined the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies in June 2020 to help ensure those in marginalized communities, especially those who are multiply marginalized, are heard within the disaster relief field. She's also on the board of the Alliance for Citizen-Directed Supports, which we both serve on. And I was really happy to recommend that Priya join. In her non-existent free time, Penner loves to take care of her ever-growing indoor garden, play with her two cats who've both already shown up on screen, and they should come back, and yell obscenities at her TV when playing video games. You can email her at the email that we dropped into the chat box. Just as a reminder, as you are signed on, there are captions available. If you click the CC button at the bottom of your screen, you will be able to view those captions. You should be able to view American Sign Language interpretation. If you're having any trouble with any of the access modalities, please just shoot us a message in the chat and we will do our best to troubleshoot to make sure that we can all access the language and the learnings together. You're welcome to share your comments and to converse with each other in the chat, and we hope that you do. To get us started, I know that I just read all of your bios and therefore talked a lot about all four of you. I would love if you could each talk a little bit about what your current organizing work looks like. And we can go ahead and start with Noor.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Noor. I use he and him pronouns. So my current organizing work, it's hard to kind of narrow down to any one thing. I would say that the relevant work here would be that I do a lot of kind of breaking down and explaining policy for people in my life that have intellectual and developmental disabilities. I would say that I'm perpetually online. Sorry, if you hear panting next to me, that would be said beagle from my bio who has to be next to me at all times. And I would say that a lot of my access work right now tends to center around kind of ongoing forms of protest that are designed to give people self-advocacy tools. The Easy Read Quran is very much one of those, in the sense that it's designed to provide an inherent in terms of breaking a cycle of inaccessibility that's very common in faith spaces where people with intellectual and developmental disabilities aren't really given the tools necessary to join the conversation. So materials that everyone can understand in plain language being one of them, and not really being given the tools and then being told, well, why would we give you the tools? You never show up. And kind of that cycle goes on for kind of ever. So that's not the entire piece of, that's not the only piece of the overall inaccessibility puzzle. There's also physical access barriers, other cognitive access barriers from entry to exit and in the ways that people behave. But interrupting even one thing and giving people the access to do that over and over again is critical. So a lot of my energy is going into that in my non-existent free time. And my work with Masjid al-Rabia these days tends to center trying to get more disabled Muslims of color to the forefront, particularly trans and queer disabled Muslims of color. Sounds like a very niche group. In fact, that is a very broad bucket. There's a lot of us. So getting us in a room, getting us to share our ideas and building up our culture and our resources together. So that's me in the current day. As a reference point, I draw a lot of my activism from kind of my roots and where I grew up. I'm originally from North Texas, and as you might have heard, based in the recent news, North Texas is not actively primed to have queer people, and especially not queer people of color, around. So I've spent a great deal of my life in various places trying to build a world that will take care of people like me in places that already don't love me, because there are other people there that do. And there are other people that I love in those places too, and they deserve as much of the resources as I have. So that's me. That's where I come from. And I try to bring that spirit of constant energy and relentlessness, but also that spirit of rest to everything that I do.
This is Lydia. Thank you so much for sharing that, Noor. I know that I care a lot too about making sure that people in communities I come from who are not necessarily as active in organizing or advocacy spaces and who may not have the resources or the safety to do so are able to access the same communities and support that I've worked really hard on creating. Ria, would you comment?
Sure. So I'm Ría Thompson-Washington. I use she, her, and Aya pronouns. My current organizing is spread across many issue areas. I have been a labor organizer, but for the last, I would say, 10 years almost, I've been working specifically in voting rights and working to help build election protection programs around the country. But more locally to where I live in the greater DC area, I've been helping a lot of the organizations who have been doing a lot of protests and direct actions with legal observer trainings. And for as Lydia mentioned, we are members of the DC Lawyers Guild, the National Lawyers Guild. And so in addition to legal observers trainings, there's a lot of know your rights trainings that I've been doing for organizations to teach them how to protest in DC and not get arrested, or if they get arrested, how to do that in a way that is beneficial for the cause. And so the other organizing issue area that I'm working on, because, fat Black woman, queer, so I have to do like everything first generation, and so the other thing that I'm working on is trying to help a new organization build out a program to redress racial segregation in residential housing. That is to assess how the federal government has contributed to completely segregated neighborhoods and communities that are still, common and prevalent in many of our metro areas now. And so I am trying to figure out ways that we can address really like racial justice at its like root causes, and how that all ties back into the prison industrial complex, and why we need to abolish the police would be the title of my memoir. So.
This is Lydia. I can't wait to read that memoir. Really want to read that. And also I was actually giving a presentation earlier this week to a group of folks that are mostly working within the criminal legal system. And I made sure to mention abolition like at least 5 times. I probably about it more. But, that's another conversation. Priya, would you share a little bit about your current organizing?
This is absolutely. And I just want to, I'm sure everyone loves my cats as almost as much as I do, but I do want to apologize. My cats are not used to me being in this general area of the apartment. And so are like, oh, apparently my cat's trying to climb a window. an image description is that he's a short, fat cat. He's small but round with a stubby tail. He's trying to climb the screen over there, so that's fun. I do apologize for any disturbances they add to our conversation today. As far as my work, you know, I am primarily, you know, I have a day job, so you know, money in my bank account and roof over my head. But I do truly consider it organizing work, because that is what we're doing. We're organizing the community. Okay. Kat?
Priya, this is a largely autistic community event, so we all want to see the cats, and you need not be apologizing for them. We want more cats, more cat content.
Oh no, don't encourage him, Lydia. He apparently has heard that and is now, he has taken that as his cue to take over the conversation. Oh boy, thank you for that. Yes, no, I have no words for them. I can share at least him, because he's right here. I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear it scraping, my computer scraping, but
Aww, that is the most.
Everyone, this is Bean, also known as Jelly Bean. He's like 2 years old. He's a little poop head, because he likes to get into everything that he shouldn't. But he's cute.
This is Lydia. Thank you for sharing him with us. He is precious. And did you want to add any further comment, or should we turn it over to Mariam?
I do just want to add, so the work that I do is with the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, and we are a nonprofit that focuses on people with disabilities and people with access and functional needs before, during, and after disasters. I count this as organizing work because we are creating the plane as we're flying it, and a lot of it, I apologize, a lot of it does include a lot of community organizing. We have a daily disability rights call that community organizers and just people from the public, whoever wants to join us for our conversation, and that, so I do consider that part, you know, as part of the organizing. But otherwise, you know, I'm organizing more individually and locally, working with folks in climate change areas, just climate justice areas, and focusing on the intersections of disability, climate, and emergency management primarily.
This is Lydia. I was actually just trying to find the information for the daily call that y'all host so I could share it out with folks, and I'm not succeeding at finding the correct information in the email, but if you can grab it and drop it in the chat, we'll also make sure that that gets sent out to everybody afterward as well.
This is absolutely, thank you so much. And yes, please do join. We love everyone. Well, we love everyone to join us. I can't say everyone loves everyone in the call, but we love to have conversations and organize together. So please do join us.
Great, thank you so much. Mariam, would you be able to talk about what organizing currently looks like for you?
Sure, this is Mariam. I'm Afghan American, and I'm wearing a light purple plaid shirt. I just wanted to say, I guess I started with most of my organizing was university based. And now that I'm not at a university, it's changed quite a bit. I'm trained as an anthropologist, so a lot of my organizing that I didn't mention is mostly international and focuses on supporting people on the move in particular, as well as people in Afghanistan. To be honest, I'm quite burned out from COVID-19, familial illnesses and issues, as well as some of you might be aware of, the situation in Afghanistan, where my family is from and where much of my family still lives. And the other is not only with COVID-19 and the struggles, but the struggles of teaching and finishing my PhD. So I basically packed up and left a job I had in refugee policy and teaching it as an adjunct at Georgetown, and decided to focus on the classroom and moved up north and am teaching at a small semester school. And I shifted to that position because of a commitment in the job descriptions to social and racial justice, and have been working on that, and especially focused on educational justice. So this is, remains a work in progress, but I think remaining here and doing that, and for instance, there's a lot of scholarships offered supposedly to increase access for students at elite institutions to enter elite institutions. However, the conditions at those institutions still need a great deal of work. So I've been focusing on setting up some programming for first generation low income students, and also supporting their needs being at traditionally white serving institutions and elite serving institutions. So I'm focusing on the classroom and that work rather than anything else, but still supporting my friends who are people on the move in Europe at the moment.
This is Lydia. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mariam. I know that I think about my work as a teacher as very much informed by my commitments to disability justice and what it means to do access-centered work. I don't believe that I, or anyone that I know, is actually perfect at it or ever will be. And of course, talking about our activism or our advocacy in the context of perfection is very much white supremacy culture. The idea that you have to be able to be perfect in order to be valid or to be respected. But I do think very much about what it means to put values into practice and not simply think about them as abstract concepts. To that end, we're actually joined tonight by a number of guests who are all students in my class on disabled people's protest. And we've talked in that class, and I know that in many community spaces, I've had these conversations as well, about what the differences are between community organizing and other strategies for change, about what the differences are between community organizing versus activism, or community organizing versus advocacy, and how when we are working as community organizers, but may also find ourselves in spaces like the nonprofit industrial complex or in the academy, like you were just talking about, Mariam, that relationship can be really complicated. And I was wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about how you see community organizing as fitting into that broader milieu of work toward change and work toward liberation. What are those differences? Do they matter? And how do you view yourself in relationship to those modalities of work for change? And any one of you can start that.
I can jump in. Sorry, go ahead, Mariam.
Okay, I will try to be quick, but it follows up a little bit on what I said, both of trying to get a bit out of the academy, because that didn't seem to still have, to be a space that I could thrive in as a first gen low income student, and with particular needs that often people don't understand as coming from Afghanistan, and with parents who didn't have access to very much education at all. So that's been a constant struggle, and to help that, I did get enmeshed in the nonprofit industrial complex and corporate humanitarianism just for a year. And it was a tough decision, because I am a critical border studies scholar, but thought that, and didn't have any illusions, but said, you know what, I'm not going to give up on my research and what I have studied and committed to. So I had to give myself a chance and Afghanistan to continue to be a part of what I wanted to do, rather than taking a different job offer, which would have taken me more into different types of academic spaces. So I bet on that and on myself. Unfortunately, it wasn't what it was really impossible to work there for me. So within a year, even though I had a 2-year position through a very prestigious fellowship, I left that job and decided I wanted to be in the classroom full time. I can't say that it was a complete loss, because there were minute changes to the institutional culture that I helped draw attention to. And before I left, I know that some of the more junior employees did learn quite a bit and learn to advocate for themselves in a different way, because I kind of was trying to support them and also convey to management where they were failing, not only failing employees of color especially, but how diversity was being weaponized in those spaces, as well as drawing attention to the gaps, basically, when someone can very nicely say that we are offering dignified images of refugees, but then really failing because they just don't have that kind of ability to see how problematic some of the things were. And it took months. It took months of emails and conversations between all levels of the organization. And it was upsetting, of course, but I'm happy to say that I left there. And I think the organization is better for having had me there. And I hope that, in particular, a South Asian employee who comes there after me will have a bit of an easier time, because later I found out that another South Asian person had similar grievances that I did, but was not taken seriously.
So what I was going to say is alarmingly and saddeningly similar to what Mariam just shared, and that is that I think that many of us come to this work because we believe that organizing is the path forward, right? It's the way that we choose to pool our power as community members and bring people along with us and teach them the skills that we have. And that is all super useful. The problem comes in when capitalism meets the organizing that we're trying to do. And so that is the nonprofit industrial complex, right? And so it doesn't matter whether you are, you could be in labor, you can be in healthcare, you can be in housing, and you're still going to come up against white supremacy culture at all turns of this work. And so I feel that is something that can be really frustrating. And, especially when during organizing, I was on the ground in Georgia in 2020, helping build out, the one of the programs that make sure that folks were able to, vote safely and just on the ground trying to bring home those 2 senators, right? And so everyone was talking about pay Black women and trust Black women and all of this stuff. But it was what actually happened is that my voice became minimized. And then it was oh, you're too loud. You're too we want to we trust Black women and Black women are going to save us. But when you actually face the mirror at some of the harm that you're experiencing from comrades, right? From people who are on your side, from well-meaning white people, oftentimes, it becomes this battle where it is easy to burn out. It's easy to just, decide like, I don't know if I have this in me to continue organizing. I think what keeps me continuing to organize is that every single campaign, I continue to learn something. I continue to see someone who hadn't been radicalized before become radicalized. I see, I get the opportunity to talk about things that I like really care about, like abolition or like community organizing in this case, and have the conversation with folks who haven't ever considered like how one small drop can cause a ripple, right? And so I think that's why I continue to come to this work, even though it is exhausting and it feels, I keep trying to find the space that is going to be the least harmful, where it's like, okay, so do I want to deal with, like a problematic, passive aggressive white woman, or do I want to deal with this like, white man who is just like, bearing down on like, what do I want to balance or hold today? And I think that makes it really challenging. But the wins and the way that we change lives as organizers, I think that's what you have to like cleave to.
I would agree. And I think that for me, the thing that it always comes down to every time I kind of think through, because I've asked myself variations of this question for most of my life, where it's like, what are basically the variants of the question, what are you doing? Like, am I doing the thing that I want to? Am I making the changes that I want to? Am I pushing towards the societal progress that I'm trying to get to here? And the answer for me consistently has been that it might not look the exact way I want it to. It might not have as broad an impact as I want it to. But yes, universally over and over again, yes, because even within systems that are deeply imperfect, systems that are deeply flawed, there are still people who are using them, and there are still people for whom that is the only way they are going to get access to and find anything that can benefit them. So, for example, like when I initially got brought onto the board for Masjid Al Rabia, I was 17. Well, no, I was sophomore year of college, so that has to be like 20-ish, somewhere around there. And I very distinctly remember, like, when I got the question from one of the founders, very distinctly feeling like, what do you think I'm doing here? Like, do you, like, I'm a college student, I'm loud and I'm angry and I'm queer and I'm all of this anger packed into a tiny little box. What do you think I can do for you? And what do you think that an org that is as small as less than 10 people is going to do to bring queer Muslim culture into a place where other people can find themselves and be taken care of and take care of each other? And I didn't want to admit those doubts, but like that was there in the back of my mind. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Is this going to do what it needs to? And the answer was yes. Like, this did do what I needed it to, because while that group was small at the time and continues to be relatively small, we're a staff of under 20 still, like, we consistently have ended up getting people from a lot of locations, especially during COVID, coming in via Zoom that have not been able to get access to disability competent and like disability aware even faith spaces pretty much anywhere else around Islam. There's a handful of disability-based organizations, and they're effectively all parent run within this particular space. And past a point, it became that at the time we were one of the only people doing this. And none of us thought that that mattered. None of us thought that we could pull the kind of weight, get the kind of money that was necessary to spread out and get further and bigger. And we didn't on our own, but we laid groundwork, and people came and built and built and built. And it's not perfect. We're not massive, but we're doing a lot better work than we were even 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, which is to say from nothing to here, which to be fair is going to be a big difference either way. But I'm proud of how far that kind of the groundwork we laid pushed us. And there's that big level of thing, but I also think about like people who are in situations where people from outside of it looking in sit there and think, what's the point? Like, why are you doing work in those areas? Why are you, for example, organizing on reproductive justice in the South? Why are you organizing on queer justice in North Texas or South Texas? Like, why are you, what's the point? People are going to die there. And the thing is, that is the point. The battles that you win matter, because that's lives that are either there or not. And that's future labor, future practices, future entire communities that can be built and survive and grow or not, based on whether that action is taken. And yes, there's definitely like a lot of factors to balance, absolutely. And I don't advocate for people self-destructing in order to try and get anything built. But by that same standard, I think it's really critical that when we're looking at these things, that we give ourselves grace and that we remember we're everywhere. Queer people, disabled people, people that are all of the things, we are everywhere. If not now, then in the future. And whatever groundwork you lay wherever you are, it matters, because someone else is going to come along and either build on that, or worst case scenario, they survive. And that's a damn good worst case scenario, is someone surviving.
This is Lydia. Priya, did you want to close us out on this comment?
I think that my fellow panelists did a fantastic job answering this question, so we can move on to the next, because I know we have a ton more questions to get to.
This is Lydia. I have 2 more questions for you, but I want to again extend the invitation to folks who are joining in. If you have questions, please share them in the chat, because I'd like to try to get to at least 1 or 2 of your questions as well. Mariam, you and Ria both talked a little bit about experiencing racism in various ways throughout your organizing work. And I would like to ask each of you if you could talk a little bit about what experiences of racism and ableism have been, how racism and ableism have shown up in the course of doing organizing and advocacy. Because, you know, a lot of folks, especially people who come from more privileged backgrounds, even if they experience marginalization in some way, may make the assumption, a very mistaken one, that organizing, activist, and advocacy spaces are the most healing spaces, or the most supportive spaces, or ones that are actually living out their values. And, you know, I've spoken about this a lot, including very publicly, that organizing and activism spaces have been the most abusive and traumatizing spaces that I've ever found myself in. And I know that I'm not alone, because I've heard that even from people who've been abusive to me have also said that that's been their experience, right? And like, that's how common this is. So would you be able to share a little bit about how racism and ableism and other forms of violence have shown up in your organizing? And then my last question after that will be a little bit about what we can do to support each other as organizers dealing with re-traumatization and vicarious trauma and being re-traumatized through the work. So that's 2 separate questions, but they're about the same topic. And any one of you is welcome to open that conversation.
Ria, why don't I defer to you to go first this time?
Sure. There's literally not enough time on this call for me to talk about the over 20 years that I spent in organizing. I mean, I realize that I don't look like I could have been organizing for 20 years, but it's just good genes. But no, in this world, it's the fat phobia, it's the misogynoir, it's the taking credit for the work that I do, programs that I built, all while silencing me when I am raising points and asking questions about equity inside of the organization, about decision-making processes and who's invited and who's sitting at the table. It's having cis het male colleagues dismiss my very real experiences as me being sensitive, and not being able to play nicely in the sandbox when I'm just calling attention to what it is. And the thing is that I too really thought the deeper that you get into progressive spaces, the safer it is. And that's not what I found to be. So because of that, it's something that I actually try to and make sure that we live our values, especially in guild spaces. It's a overly lawyeristic space. It's a National Bar Association and the first integrated bar association. And still, there's still anti-Blackness, there's still pervasive white supremacy culture. And so as the chair of the United People of Color Caucus, which is a caucus whose sole entity and being is to move forward racial justice in the guild and to uplift the people of color who are doing this work and often get overlooked, be they legal workers or jailhouse lawyers or lawyers or whatever, activists, however. And so again, I just go back to, actually, I don't have a good response, because I realize this is a cycle of harm, that there's not much that I can do to disrupt at the moment. But I continue to work through it, because I believe that organizing is the way that we're going to make the changes that we want to see in the world. I know that is. And because I know that that is going to work, I've seen it happen. We're living evidence of it, right? The fact that we're here together in this moment, having this conversation, is evidence that change can happen and will. And also recognizing that it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And I'm not organizing for change that's going to affect my life. It's about the people who are coming after. Check.
Thank you, Ría. This is Mariam again. Ría laid out so much that hits me as well. I think there's several different categorizations of violence that I would put out there for people to think about. So one is thinking about visibility and invisibility, in particular invisible disabilities, and how that plays out, and the assumptions made about one when one is not, and kind of rejects and refuses the need to always perform one's trauma and one's diagnoses or one's struggles in order to be heard or to be treated with respect. So part of what I try to do is kind of push against that in the organizing that I do. But at times, I think organizing spaces I've been in, both at the Garland sit-in and others, have been extraordinarily violent because of assumptions made about me that I couldn't possibly, be struggling with so much that I couldn't have a less visible disability. That yeah, I mean, there's just so much that I could go into about that. The aspect of elitism comes in as well as how that is allied with power at universities. So at the Garland sit-in, the building that we were in was a post-1968 structure and was meant to be unoccupiable. And also part of that in terms of the architecture was that the university strategically placed or situated student services, student financial services, the registrar, student disability services, as well as career services and such in the same building as the president's office and other administrative offices. So when we took that over, and there's a lot of, there are some different narratives, and I'll drop in the chat a third-party investigation done by the faculty at Johns Hopkins University after 7 of us were arrested, and after the university went on a campaign to really try to go after several of us, and we were targeted quite severely. Thankfully, we had enough support, and we made it through it, and also the faculty, my faculty in anthropology really did stand up for us as well. But the university doesn't forget sometimes who the organizers are, right? And they will go after you. And I'm trying to speak more generally of universities. My university was particularly heinous in how it behaved because and I'm forgetting the names of some of these offices, but one of the the student conduct office, one of the conduct officers said that, she practices restorative justice and this and that. So that was used in order to help, her get the job in the university to say it's restorative justice and this and that. But then you look at the process and the ways in which they had us perform our traumas, and it was really just to get us. And had we not had that support, I might not have gotten my PhD. And yes, I agree, Rachel, in the chat. And that was extraordinarily violent. Again, not to toot my own horn, I won a very prestigious scholarship, as I mentioned. The university did not acknowledge me at all, and refused to even give me a call or put it. It was just kind of funny, but it also made me feel kind of good that I made the administration that angry. So that's all right. The other thing that can be pretty heinous is in Palestine solidarity, and the attacks that one will receive because one is allied with Palestinians and their rights, and in support of a one-state solution, and for equal rights for Palestinians, for human rights, and for the right of return. It puts a target on you, and I've never been targeted so fiercely as when we organized the Teach-In for Gaza, and I was one of the named co-organizers. And I think that really hurt me in a lot of ways, and hurt me professionally and academically, because there were professors who I was close to who didn't agree with the boycott, the academic boycott of Israel. But I stuck with that because it was and still is important to me. And as part of that, it opens you up to all sorts of other abuses. I had been targeted and called everything from fat phobic, even though I've also had struggles with weight and such, and called anti-Semitic on more occasions than I would like to recall. And yeah, it's just awful. And I don't want to take too much more time, but I will say it also is very difficult in that I'm not a visible Muslim to many, and I'm darker than some. So colorism comes to play a role, and not wearing a hijab. and at the Garland sit-in, for instance, my friend and I, she is a Muslim who wears hijab and is more light-skinned, and we noticed how differently we were treated by our peers and by our supposed comrades, and that created a lot of issues for us. And going back to what Ria said, of not getting credit for what you're doing, and all of that is just very painful, but also can be perfectly fine, right? Because we're fighting for others and we're fighting for what comes after. And we'll get through this, and we can also have our words and our behaviors delegitimized, but sometimes people will come back and realize that we weren't doing what it is they were accusing us of doing, or that we were acting according to our ideas of justice rather than something else.
This is Priya. I'm just sitting here nodding my head at everything that you're saying, because I also have done organizing work in various in college spaces, and it takes something out of you to be in that toxic environment, trying to organize, receiving the racism, the ableism, all of it within the organizing spaces and from the university and society in general. I really feel like a lot of what you're saying, you know, and what you're sharing from your experiences organizing on the collegiate level applies to organizing in general. You know, I found that, you know, I have been, you know, what's the word? Denied leadership positions, been overlooked for leadership positions, been actively, you know, mistreated verbally for simply trying to, you know, be a person of color, disabled woman of color, you know, surprise, surprise, we exist, right? In these leadership spaces, and constantly being devalued and overlooked and actively hurt and harmed. It takes a lot out of you. So I just want to say, first and foremost, that I think I and a lot of others can really relate to what you're sharing and appreciate that, because we've been there as well. And I think that goes to the question too, though, is, you know, we all, I don't want to say all because we don't all have the same experiences, but we have very similar experiences, and that re-traumatization, and, you know, it's almost impossible to acknowledge and address until we can sort of say to ourselves, you know, I, as a person of color, disabled person of color, et cetera, am harming my friends and colleagues, right? And I'm doing it in these ways. And I think that takes a level of A, awareness, but B, really, you know, critique, you know, really level of owning that a lot of people really, within the organizing spaces that we're in, a lot of people don't pay attention to and aren't using. And I do want to add that there was a question in chat, and it sort of arches over, I think, you know, one of the solutions to the re-traumatization and whatnot, and it's so, it seems sort of counterproductive, is finding like-minded people. Now, how do we do that, right? It's going into these community organizing spaces, getting reharmed, etc. So I don't think that, like Ria said in the beginning of this question, you know, there is no easy answer. I think we are all doing the best that we can, but I do think that there's a level of ownership and I'm forgetting the word I want to use. Simply ownership that isn't there. And I think both folks of color and our white allies and white non-allies need to be aware of.
I would absolutely agree. And I think that, yeah, I agree with a lot of what everyone has said so far. I would also add that, like, there's like what people I feel like have historically called benevolent racism is becoming like increasingly prevalent, where people are just kind of going in and assuming they know what they're doing, and then they really, really, really don't. And then people of color have to go in and be kind of the educators, the people who are explaining the ways in which what they're doing might be harmful or might be challenging and cause more harm. And kind of that benevolent mistreatment, I feel like, is, or whatever we want to call it, like the thing of stepping on people's feet repeatedly and then looking down and realizing, oh, wait, that's a lot of blood. Like, talking about that, having those conversations are good and important and transformative, and white allies need to be doing more of the work on that, is what I will say. But by that same standard, I think that all of us have roles to play for that in various communities where we're the ones with privilege. You know, like, I am in a weird place in my life right now in that I have some amount of stability that I've never had growing up, like a kid of immigrants and relatively low income for most of my life. But now that I have that stability, I consider it squarely and very firmly my job to use whatever leftover income I have as a perpetually chronically ill person with a rare disease that has to blow a lot of money on various experimental treatments, but whatever I have left over, to put that back towards people who are not in the same position, and to explain to other people who have any amount of disposable income that what might be like added security for me for like a day or two can drastically change the course of someone's life, even if it's a smaller fragment, right? So that's one example of it, but like kind of that triaging, that movement, and that shifting of power structure is necessary, I think, to start moving people kind of out of that. And I would also say that as someone who very, very strongly believes that anything I've ever done has been because of the grace of other people and like being helped by various people, a lot of them people of color and a lot of them queer and trans people of various stripes, like help and like-minded people can come from places you wouldn't expect. But by that same standard, it's okay to admit that there can be trauma and pain and suffering along the way to people finding and learning how to be better, and learning what they do and don't support, and learning who they can be and how to support the people that they love and who they are. And that there's not a guidebook to that process. There absolutely should be. I would read the hell out of that, but you take it a step at a time. And if you need to bite shit and scream and be angry and be frustrated every step of the way, you do it. You do it because it's not fair that we have to do this much work to get people on board. But depending on where you are, depending on what you have access to, sometimes you might end up having to do that. And there are cases where it's worth it. There are cases where it's not. I'm not going to lie to you. But I will say that how it goes in whatever direction, you doing your best and you trying and you working within the bullshit racist confines of every structure we have to climb to try and get to where we're going is not your fault. do the best you can, use the resources you've got, but don't blame yourself for the way the world is built.
This is Lydia. As we are nearing the end of our time together, I have the lightning round question, which I previewed. We've talked a lot about the things that have gone wrong, racism and ableism we've dealt with, trauma and re-traumatization in organizing work, vicarious trauma, violence, isolation. What would you share with other people about what healing work looks like as an organizer, about what taking care of each other looks like? Lightning round.
This is Priya. I'm gonna start us off because I've been thinking about this. And I think we all talk about self-care and we all talk about, resting and what does that mean? What does that look like? It looks like different things for different people, etc. I think the thing that is most truly restorative to my organizing soul, spirit, whatever, however you want to say it, is, being able to be in a space that doesn't require me to have to constantly have that advocate activist brain on all the time, right? We've all been in that space with friends, for those of us who are disabled, and been, always having to think of our own access needs. Can I go to that restaurant? Can I access the menu? Can I, do these regular things that everyone else can? And so being able to find even one space, if it's virtually, if it's maybe in person with somebody, finding that space where where someone understands your access needs and understands, the love in that relationship, right? And that understand the love in the relationship of understanding each other's access needs, to clarify. So I think even if it's just 15 minutes of, talking with somebody, or 5 minutes, even if it's just a text, connecting with somebody else who understands what you're going through and shares the struggle, but doesn't require you to trauma dump or can listen if that's what you need, right? And unfortunately, not everyone has that type of space, which is all the more important why we do what we do.
Absolutely. I agree. Having a person or a place or a thing or all of the above that will let you shut the activist brain off is critical. I'm very bad at this and I suffer. Be better than me. I will also definitely advocate for the proud Southern tradition of having a 1 or 2 or ideally 4 or 5 friends that you can just at some point sit down with and just let out everything and just talk and talk and fucking talk for hours with no break and just vent with stream of consciousness, no real in between other than, the obvious boundaries, being respectful of people, but just going and not masking and not thinking critically about it. Just get it out of you. Because sometimes it's just needed. And just to briefly touch on what someone mentioned up thread, in terms of finding other people, strategies are pretty much find what you're into, find who's doing it locally, see if you can tap into that and copy it. By copy it, I mean attend, and if it's not quite the thing, figure out who's doing it better, or if you can do it better, run with it.
So I don't actually have the answer, right? Because I think I'm still developing, I'm still refining and developing what care looks like. I know what I want it to be, right? I know what the idealistic version of that is. But I think I try to catch it wherever I can. So like, for example, this week, even though I couldn't take like a vacation and I just want to shut everything down and do that, my wife and I are at like, you know, we're away, like we got a house close to the water, like 3 blocks away, so that like I can just smell the beach and I'm working from in a different space, right? And that feels like care, even though we're not like getting out and it's in the middle of a panoramic and a pandemic and it's not super accessible and we don't want to go out and like eat in restaurants because we're still, you know, both immunocompromised and, you know, having to be mindful of how we move. But we needed to just get out of our house. So we have our dogs with us and we're just in another house for just, you know, 4 days to like do that. I dyed my hair, you know, a color that I just really felt like I wanted to do. I changed my nose ring. I am trying to, you know, trying to do things that make me feel better, even though I'm just in the house, you know, like therapy. I don't know. And then, you know, for those who can and for those who desire to, like, weed is out there, like relax. So that's my recommendation. Toke it up.
This is Mariam again. For me, I think I rely a lot on my friends and the friends who, especially the ones who I organized with in the past, especially at Garland Sit-In. And those 3 that I'm still closest to, they hold me accountable and I hold them accountable, but they also see me, you know, so if I'm ranting and raving about some like racist thing that happened, they're not gonna like express any doubt. And if they disagree or we disagree on something, we eventually come around. And I'm usually the one that tells them to be quiet. I don't want to hear any more about organizing or anything. But yeah, it's helpful to have people like that around.
This is Lydia. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us this evening. I learned tonight a lot from you, and I have learned from all 4 of you over the years, and I'm grateful for your work, but more importantly, for who you are, for your existence, and for your presence in this world. Thank you also to our access team, our interpreters tonight, and our captioner, and to AWN's team, which includes Kaylee and Nancy. And for those of you who are still here, our next event in the Liberating webinar series will be this Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific, and it is revisioning disability and madness, crypt poetics and cultural work. It is a discussion and performance with 3 disabled and mad BIPOC artists and poets, moderated by a feminist disability studies scholar, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you and have a good night.